All right, everyone. Welcome back to Masari's Unqualified Opinions. I'm your host, Ryan Selkis at 2-Bit Idiots. I want to thank our sponsors at Voyager for this episode where we've got Waves Platform's Head of Growth, Matt Persofsky. We're going to talk about the history of Waves, the coming smart contract wars, how Max and his team feel about whether this is a zero-sum game or how they're differentiated. And then most recently, want to dive into a somewhat contrarian update that you all have made with respect to the token economics of Wave. But first, why don't we dive in, Max, with just having you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about how we even got to this point right now, where you're sitting here and we're having this conversation, and maybe a little bit about the history of Waves as well.
Okay. Hi guys, thanks for having me first of all. I'm in crypto since 2015, but before I have been involved in gaming, and actually I have been working in the company gaming side. This is kind of one of the biggest Eastern European game publisher actually, and it was a quite unique company because I think they actually made the first $1 million on in-app purchase by Android, and it was absolutely interesting time, so the first time. And then we have been working very closely, working in esports industry. And actually, I was introduced in one of the biggest sport events in Moscow called Epicentral, and I was very surprised what's happening there. It was very nice about all that happened about esports. And after that, we're trying to play around with the esports and actually make some spin-off of the company and make the company named Gosu.ai. It's kind of like using machine learning algorithms. We actually create the platform which help users to help hardcore players to improve their technical skills, gaming skills. And after that, actually, we decided to really to find kind of new digital, try to implement new digital payments inside the platform, and then trying to discover what we have. And then we just actually discovered Bitcoin in 2015, 2016. And actually, as it just blown our mind, and we decided that really we'd like to make some first implementation there. And then in 2016, actually, after the token sale of the Waves, I was introduced to the core team. It was very old, I think, it was maybe 10 people, I think. And actually, I was used to work as operation director, and now I'm responsible for actual growth and strategy. And so the Waves before it was changed dramatically since the start. Of course, market changing and we just changed. And Waves used to be as a platform for issue the token. So it was idea of 2016, and actually we and everything that we committed we did. And actually on the 2017, Waves being the second largest platform of the Ethereum for issue the tokens. So maybe 3% of all tokens, but still, yeah. And then we just changed, and actually then the platform evolves dramatically, and now the actual launched the smart contracts, and actually now the way to understand is much bigger, and now the Waves is just open platform of and decentralized environment for Web3 application, specifically working with open finance and gaming. So this is kind of different.
So obviously there's a lot more to these platforms than number go up, sorry, I was on mute for a second, just to eliminate some background noise. There's obviously a lot more to these platforms than just number go up. Right? Even though that's what most people care about when they're trading them. You're the head of growth. The token price is down, 70% this year. Bitcoin's kind of come back. Some of the other assets have come back. How do you measure success, right? So on a day-to-day basis, when you're thinking about adoption of this platform amidst a sea of alternatives, Where are the initial applications that your team is focused on, and what does success look like over the course of the next couple of quarters? Because, Waves, if you're looking at it through a critical lens, could fit into the bucket of a smart contract platform with no network effects and no real users. So, how do you cross that chasm? And get the first kind of wedge into a sticky user base, given all the alternatives?
Yeah, very good question. Actually, as we have some legacy, actually, the platform we issue is open, and actually we just start and launch the smart contracts. I can say recently, right? So we just made 1 year ago, and we totally fully understand the situation here, and of course we understand. I think there is no reason to compete with guys like Ethereum or the other one, because just really there is no reason. I can say our main strategy is about developers. I can say that we have kind of crypto community with the guys who are really involved in the industry. I think it's just very small percent of all population, right? And the main idea was actually we would like to cover maybe 99% of the developers who have no idea what is the blockchain, but they just really would like to play around with that. And because of that, we actually have big kind of campaign. And we actually work with universities, not specifically in the US, but mostly in Europe. And actually, this kind of workshops about Waves and Web3 overall, and where we discuss mostly not blockchain guys, what is it blockchain and how to implement that. And this is one point. The second point that we actually will be one part of the business for us is just enterprise, and I think here the kind of it's kind of two different areas, but I think in enterprise area we have quite good success actually locally here on kind of former CIS countries. And speaking about public chain, I think the market is small, and I think we have a lot of potential now that actually just everyone is on board now, right?
Mm-hmm. So are you still working with Azure and Deloitte?
Yeah, actually we have a good connection with Microsoft, and actually Microsoft and Amazon.
Is that the public chain or is that the enterprise set of solutions?
No, they mostly work on enterprise. Actually, we have it's independent team who just working on enterprise, and it's maybe only up to 100 people working full time. So Microsoft and Deloitte are working mostly with that. So because it's company is really concentrating on government stuff and government state companies, other companies, big companies.
What are some of the things that are actually getting implemented at the enterprise level? Because it kind of feels fitting we're having this conversation now, because the last time that we heard a ton of buzz about enterprise blockchain initiatives and different companies actually leaning in, it was in the last crypto recession, and not much really came of those initial pilots. But what are you seeing, and is there anything this time around that's getting a bit more traction, or just even data points in general about whether and how some of these large enterprises might be able to use at first the permission chains, and then potentially either anchor back to or start building on top of these public chains as well?
Yeah, as I mentioned, actually, kind of Waves enterprise, actually they run by separate teams, and actually I don't know too much information about what happened there, but what I can say what I know that we have kind of course that hype time is done, and now kind of that budget which we had, for example, 2016 from the companies which allocate the money to make some prototypes. Of course, it's less than today, but still I think it's a very good time. If we speak about actual use cases, we have for like Waves Enterprise have different like clients around it's mostly state one. We start in Russia, but actually trying to expand this year. And in Russia we have like several one of the biggest enterprise companies who just would like to do us. Like for example, we have some like last news which like Alfa Bank, which is one of the biggest private bank, we would like to implement waste technology and the same, and so on. So, but yeah, I think like the private chain is just actually built by other teams. So I think for this conversation, we concentrate on the public chain.
One initiative, yeah. So let's go back to the public chain. So I guess we'll end with the token economics. But first, you did have one interesting initiative. As you think about adding support for ERC20 tokens and at least making it easier for developers to cross over and build on Waves, you also came out with a decentralized rating system. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that initiative has gone? I believe it's from June or so this year, where shortly after you announced ERC20 support, you had a focus on actually identifying safe protocols and tokens that had met certain minimum thresholds in the eyes of, I guess, your team or your community. What did that look like, and how has that grown over time?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to speak a little bit about like Waves DEX. Actually, before the Waves DEX was like kind of the part of the client, but like recently we decided to distinguish like Waves DEX as an independent product, and they have a separate team. They have dedicated separate team. So, and because we understand like Waves DEX, I can say like the first DeFi project for Waves is quite successful. I mean, like, because it just worked. How it works actually, just the concept very similar to IDX. Then you have the matching mechanism is centralized, but like settlements actually taking place on blockchain. And before we have gateways, it will be like trusted one on ERC20 token. You can trade ERC20 token. You can trade BTC, Ethereum, or for example, like some even fiat currencies. So, and actually launched in 2016, it's really like 3 years old. And recently we just launched ERC20 tokens because it actually have the demand. We actually understand that we should like increase the liquidity and have the demand from the community. And actually the guys, all the community decided that the first token on the way, or the ERC20 token on Waves will be Banport, right? Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think just this is we think still I think very like decentralized exchange have very good very strong potential even today, even we have like kind of that big players as Binance, but still I think if you would do like things right, and I think it's very good potential in that. So that's why we're trying. I mean, we just distinguish that as a separate product. I think that we will see how it works, but yeah.
Got it. How much of a priority is the Waves DEX? Because that's another area that is highly competitive, and it seems as if once there is a decentralized exchange that works, it's winner take all, because you're going to have a shared pool of liquidity, which is really the only way that you'll ever be able to compete with some of the larger centralized exchanges at scale. No?
Sure, of course. I think, me personally, I think that, of course, still now it doesn't matter. I mean, like users, for them, like kind of like big players as the Binance and like centralized exchange is still. I mean, they are okay with that, right? It doesn't matter like about decentralization or something. It doesn't. I mean, it's kind of not so important if you speak about liquidity. I think, but I wish that soon we actually really get some more liquidity in the decentralized exchange, because anyway, I think it just DEX is mostly it's big experiments, right? And I think we should at least just wait maybe 1, 2, 3 years when the actual liquidity to the decentralized exchange. Because it's like centralized exchange is more like you have the liquidity, and liquidity is key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so let's wrap up with a discussion around one of the most recent updates you've made. So I mentioned at the onset that like many other token projects in the ecosystem, there's been some pretty significant selling pressure on the Waves token, and yet you all got comfortable with adding perpetual inflation, or at least dynamic community governed inflation to the protocol. So what was the thinking behind that change in policy, and how do you anticipate that's going to change some of the incentives going forward for the community that's actually holding these things?
Yeah. First of all, I think it's very important to mention like the consensus we have in our system, but I think it's just very this story. As actual Waves use LPOS, like in a least proof of stake, it kind of enhanced version of proof of stake. And if you speak like proof of stake, that if you just if you have some, if you note, if the node have some amount of money of the tokens on the you have some amount of tokens, so you just have it's like increasing chance to get the new block, right? And in the LPOS, actually you have you can delegate or lease your tokens to the full node, and actually the big amounts of the tokens which are leased to the full nodes, the bigger the chance of the full nodes is being selected in the next moments, right? And this is kind of like least proof of stake is kind of really, I can say, it just secure the network in several ways. But Waves, first of all, it's actually, of course, like the big amounts of Waves in on the system, it just it's like becoming more secure, and because like we're like it will be more difficult to make like for the bad players to make some 51% attack. And second source is that when actually the Waves token will be leased or delegated to the pool nodes, and from there like cold storage. And in this case, like the full node is actually which are online every time. It just should have just little amounts of tokens. In this case, it will be it will become more so less difficult. It will become kind of more difficult to make some attacks on the wallet. And this is because like we should it's very important why we should make some why we make that changes on the economic model. And like speaking about economic model, I think like there have been many discussions lately in the Waves community overall about the topic of governance. Governance is specifically regards to cryptocurrency and how and who should like make some decisions, right, on different aspects of network, and actually how to improve the economic model, how to make it more balanced, how to make it more self-sustainable. And then we actually understood that there were a lot of views around money supply, because like before the money supply in Waves was fixed, so 100 million tokens. And we understood that we actually would like to provide power to the community to decide how the money supply will change in the future. And what we proposed to add additional mining rewards in each generation of blocks, and which actually determined by community, the disciples of the mining rewards. And doing that, we actually introduced decentralized analog of central bank monetary policy conformity, right? When they can change that interest rate. And actually, what we did, we just add more 6 waves in each generation block, and actually the mining generation, the block generation, they actually would vote for who would like to change, or the kind of that rewards, or they can stay, like can live on the same level, and they can vote for each 100,000 blocks, just approximately 69 days, and they can change it in increments of 0.5 waves at a time. And and if, for example, if they have like more than 50% of votes, that's actually the change that we have to change. Otherwise, there is no change at all. So I think this is kind of the way where why actually the community proposed that. First of all, we personally think that could really attract more block generators to the ecosystem, right? To just enrich our ecosystem. And second one, it just really provides kind of provide the power of making decision to the hands of the community. So
Great. Well, I know you have to hop on a flight soon, so maybe last question: any major milestones or upcoming releases that people should know about and keep an eye out for the next couple months before the end of the year?
So I think that we don't have like some like big updates I think until this year. But what we are planning to be in San Francisco blockchain week. So next week actually. So we'll be very welcome to meet some community there and discuss how to do that.
Well, anyone that's going to be in San Francisco, I will not. Some of the folks from the Messari team will be, and obviously Max and some of the folks from Waves will be as well. Make sure to track him down, pepper him with questions, and until then, we appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for the conversation. Yeah.
Thank you, and until next time, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Peace.